and my friends there at Bucks County will advance the slides for me if I need to join by phone. So one thing that I certainly know is that when we use technology in our teaching and our presenting, you should always plan for the challenges to arise, because we know that absolutely happens. And so I was joking before people came into the room here, I was joking that it was time for plan B, C, D, and E. And that is the way that we need to plan when we are teaching and presenting with technology. And yet it does allow us to connect, even with its foibles. We are all here together now, and it's really important to remember the value, and even again with the challenges. So thank you for your patience with our little bit of a late start here this morning. I am going to go ahead and pull up my slides because I have so much to share with you today. Really excited to just take a moment, really is what we're doing today, just to take a moment and remind ourselves why we do what we do. Because I know that when we're teaching in online spaces, it can be very draining. It can feel time consuming, it can be exhausting, it can feel disconnected from our students in a way that doesn't happen when we're teaching in person. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the bigger picture and we lose sight of our why. So that's what I'm here to do today, is to share with you my thoughts on what is important about what we do. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question. Now, if you would like to, you're welcome to answer me in the chat box. If you don't necessarily want to do that, you can just mentally answer or make a note on your own notes if you're taking any. I'm curious, what is it that motivates you to be an excellent online teacher? Feel free to put a few words into the chat box if you would like. Your students, that's the right answer, Michelle. Absolutely. The students, they deserve no less. Yes, thank you, Steve. Student success. We care about our students. We want them to learn and to be successful, to achieve their goals. Ensuring accessibility. Everybody is saying your students, well, okay, I might as well be done with my talk because never mind, you know what's so important about what we do here. Connection to life and knowing what it's like not to have the instructor presence in a course that you took. Yes, exactly. That really does make a difference. If you have been an online student and you have experienced a lack of instructor presence, then you are even more motivated to be present with your students. And again, what we want to do is to help design learning experiences so that students can remember what they're learning in our classes. And of course, it's so important to connect with our students as well. So I wanted to tell you a little story about a student of mine. This was in spring of 2018. This is a representative student. I also changed her name in this story just to protect her privacy. But Lori, my representative Lori, was a student in spring 2018, and I teach an online graduate class. It's a 500 level class on technology fluency and leadership. And the whole point of the class is to be able to use technology well. That's the main theme. Now, in this class, I require students to post a video introduction. And even before the pandemic, I thought that it was important for us all to get comfortable working and talking and being in video communications. Certainly that has only increased over the past year. But Lori posted an introduction that was just a text, a written introduction with a picture of herself and her small son. And she didn't post the video. And she was the only student in the class who didn't. Other students said, well, I'm feeling kind of nervous about this. I don't really like this, but here's my video introduction. And she just chose to post text. And, you know, I was a little irritated by that, but I just docked the points on the rubric that were required for the video piece and moved on. And for the whole rest of the class, Lori was a great student. She was an A student, did everything on time, never had any issues with her at all. So I didn't really think too much more about it until it was the day after that online class finished. And I got an email from Lori, and she told me that she had noticed that she was just a few points shy from an A and that she had a 4.0 in her graduate program. It was really important to her to do her best and to earn the grades. And she was looking for a way to resubmit a former assignment and see if she could earn enough points to get to the A. And then she said in her email, she said, there's something that's been bothering me all semester, and I want to tell you about this. She told me that the week prior to our class starting, she went to the door at her home and saw her ex, her son's father, was standing on the doorstep coming to pick him up to take him out. Apparently, it was very visibly apparent he had been drinking. She said, not this time, we'll do this later. He beat her in front of her small son. And he was wearing brass knuckles, and he knocked out some teeth. Her face was still so bruised and swollen and damaged that she did not want to present that to her fellow students. And so she chose not to record the video and just take the points loss. And she was just asking me, she just wanted to let me know why she didn't do it. She wasn't even asking me for any favors necessarily, but she just wanted me to know why she chose not to post that video. And it really, really shook me up. You know, those moments in your life that are kind of pivotal. And it really made me think, here I am assigning things and making requirements about videos. And I still feel it's good to be comfortable with videos. But now I have a phrase in there that says, if there's a really good reason that you cannot share a video, then you can post a picture instead and maybe let me know kind of what's going on. So it just got me thinking, there are people in our classes and they have real lives and they have lots of pressures. And I've come to even think throughout the course of this pandemic, they have wounds, they have scars. We all come into these online spaces with a history, with other circumstances. And I realized before this event happened, by the way, I did allow her to resubmit that assignment. She did earn an A in the class. But I realized that I had come to kind of disassociate, the decisions I was making in class from the people who were in the class. And in fact, I had even come to think of the people in my class as rows in a grade book, as tasks on a grading list. I was not really connecting with them person to person. And so Lori's experience, it just gave me an opportunity to realize she's a single mom. She's pursuing a master's degree because she wants to earn a more, sustainable income, have more rewarding work, be able to provide a better life for her son. And my respect for her grew exponentially, and it caused me to really think deeply about why I do what I do. And my conclusion was that there are people in our online classes who generally have goals and who generally are trying to make a better life. It's really rare to find somebody who's taking an online, especially a required class, not something for personal enrichment, and they're just there for fun. They're there for a reason. And I just had an opportunity to think again about the value of supporting every single person in my classes in order to help them reach their goals and make that better life for themselves. So I firmly believe that, there we go, there's the mouse. I firmly believe that in the pandemic, higher ed was absolutely shaken to its core. We have never experienced anything like we did with the onset of COVID-19 and the big pivot to online. I cannot believe how long it has lasted. Last spring semester, I thought, okay, let's just get over the finish line. And little did any of us know that we would still be in this situation over a year later, hopefully emerging. But I know that many of us are planning for a fall with more online teaching, even a future with more online teaching in online spaces to enhance. But I think it was more than just the pandemic. I've also believed that we experienced a 1-2 punch in spring of 2020, that the twin asteroids of first, the pandemic, and secondly, the death of George Floyd caused a racial reckoning in higher education that before we had even recovered from the big pivot and even had come to terms with teaching in new formats, we were shaken again to the core by this death and the ensuing renewed calls for racial justice and social justice and reckoning and dealing with systemic inequities in higher education. That, again, the ensuing activity just really caused us to think deeply about existing inequities and existing problems in higher education. And so I would argue that now we have a choice. We can adapt or die. We have on one side here these avian dinosaurs that eventually became birds, or on the other side, we can put our heads down in the sand, pretend nothing happened. And I believe that higher ed is changing and we need to change with it. Now, right now, as we, again, are hopefully approaching the end of the pandemic, there's a lot of people who are wondering what is next. And I'm talking to people all around the country, and many people are saying, if we go back to the way that it used to be, and if we are not making necessary changes, then we will have really wasted this crisis. We will not have taken the opportunity to adapt and thrive as a result. Again, the pandemic increased inequities. I've come to believe that, in fact, it actually just revealed the things that were already there. This is a picture of two students from a liberal arts college in the New England area This story was in the New York Times in April of 2020. The student on the left, when her campus closed, went to her family's second home in the Hamptons. The student on the right, when her campus closed, she had been at that liberal arts college. She was a valued member of the lacrosse team. When her campus closed, she went back to her family's food truck in Florida. And this is the kind of inequity that may not have even necessarily been apparent at the college. She was living in a dorm. Nobody needed to know anything about her background. But when she went home and then it was time to turn on Zoom cameras, she was in a situation that revealed inequities in her home's experience. So I believe that the pandemic is going to absolutely have lasting impacts, and not only the pandemic, but also, again, these renewed calls for racial justice. And I believe that what we certainly know is that technology is here to stay. Lots of people are embracing this, that we need to be more ready to communicate in online spaces, whether that's in our learning management system, whether that's live synchronous like we're doing right now, or everything in between. There's lots of new formats that we're experimenting with and have been during the pandemic. Technology is absolutely here to stay, but it can't do everything. Technology does not do the teaching. What we know is that we need people in our classes, and we need to remember that they're people, and really work hard to overcome the distance. This is what you yourselves were saying, is that the reason you want to be an excellent online teacher is in order to support your students to the best of your ability. And what we know is that we have to make an extra effort to cultivate these connections in community. These kinds of engaged teaching and learning interactions, they just don't happen quite as naturally or effortlessly as they can in person. So we just know that we learn from and with other people, and it's hard to do that when we're at a distance. If we were all together in the same room now, this would be a very different experience. For one thing, we probably could have started on time. So I just want to share with you something else that really got me thinking. Lori's experience shook me up and made me think deeply about why I do what I do. And then after that happened, I was involved in writing Small Teaching Online with Jim Lang, and really, again, having the opportunity to research and think deeply about how do we close the distance. And something happened in June of 2019 when, right as the book was coming out. I also teach Pilates, as I think was mentioned, and so I had gone over to the gym. I was getting ready to teach my class for that day, and I was hurrying into the building. I was following a woman carrying her rolled up yoga mat, and again, it's June. I live in Flagstaff. It's a beautiful summer day. So I rounded the corner into the hallway where the studio is, and I saw her standing outside the open door to the studio. She was in the hallway with her yoga mat, and she was standing outside the open door, and I thought, why doesn't she go in? And immediately I was able to answer myself, it's because she doesn't know if she's supposed to. So she was standing there with kind of a palpable, almost a tangible sense of confusion, even frustration. Is class even happening? Am I in the right place? And because I picked up on that in that moment, I said to her, are you here for class? And she said, yes. I said, great, me too, come on in. We got the lights on, we got the music playing, and everything went well. We had a really great class, but it really got me thinking again about the experience that people have when they show up for an online class. They click into our asynchronous online courses in particular, and they don't see anybody else. The lights are off. There is no music playing. It's hard for them to know if they're in the right place at the right time. Now, I'm not arguing that we should be online 24/7 so that anytime a student clicks into class, we're right there ready to help them. We can't do that. That is not sustainable. It's not healthy for our work-life balance. And if we do allow ourselves, as I have done before, to get drained of our online teaching energy, then it's hard to be the best online teacher that we can be. So my argument is that we want to do everything that we can to help our online students, whether it is asynchronous, whether it's live synchronous like this, just to help them feel like the lights are on, the music is playing, and they are, in fact, in the right place at the right time. So, I've just really had a lot of opportunity to think deeply about what do we know about online classes. And I would argue that we don't know enough. Now, again, the pandemic has accelerated all of our experience teaching in online environments. But when we compare that to how long we have been teaching and learning in physical classrooms, there really is no comparison. By the time we get to teaching college classes, we have been students or teachers in person for literally decades. And our students as well have much, much more experience being students in physical classrooms, even though, again, this is changing as a result of the pandemic. But it's still the case that we all collectively have a greater depth of experience in person. We know what good online teaching, we know what good teaching and learning looks like in person. We know what we should do. Students know what they should do. They come in, they sit down, they face the front, and they are supported by the other people in the room as well. So that, for example, if I'm a student in your class and I notice that everybody is getting out their notebooks, getting ready to take notes, I go, oh, it's a good idea. I'll get out my notebook right now. That's the kind of thing. Or if you say turn to page 43 and I don't quite catch that, I can turn to my neighbor and say, what page are we on? And that's the kind of support that we can gain when we are together in person. And that's the kind of barrier that we face online. There is growing experience. There's a growing research body of literature to tell us what really does work based on the evidence. But again, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that we are still kind of finding our way. And there are these kinds of inherent challenges. The fact that, generally speaking, online students are doing their work by themselves without somebody sitting next to them, that alone causes a lot of challenge when they're trying to figure out what is it that I'm supposed to do with this particular online class. There are some things that we do know about online classes. We know, this is a representative student and a representative faculty, we know that students struggle to feel connected to you, their instructor. They do feel disconnected, sometimes cut off or even adrift and not supportive. And in the chat box, there was, sorry, I glanced at the chat box and it was distracting because it's an interesting conversation over there. So I'm going to return my attention right here and encourage you to please do feel free to post in the chat box. I should have mentioned we will have time for questions and answers at the end. And so if you want to post any comments or your own strategies that are working or any questions that you'd like for us to address at the end, please do feel free to use that chat box tool. That's the advantage, in my opinion, of doing a virtual presentation. We can't do that when we're together in person quite as easily. So I noticed again that somebody had said, yeah, I was an online student and my instructor wasn't really there. And unfortunately, that really is the experience of our online students. Even though we try, I believe that there are sometimes little things that we can do to help our students know that we are present with them. What we also know about online students from the literature is that they need to be able to really regulate their own learning and be self-directed. And in order to be successful, because of the greater independence, even when we are there present with them, there's still more independence because they're doing their work by themselves at home. And so students who have well-developed executive functioning skills are going to be more successful. I don't know about your students. Some of mine are still developing those skills and those qualities, their ability to manage their time, prioritize their work, motivate themselves. All of these things our students are still developing. And so what can we do in our classes to help them develop these skills? They're really good life skills. They're going to, help them to achieve their goals. What can we do in our classes to set structures up to help them? What we know about online faculty, we know that many online faculty don't really love teaching online. And I don't know if that's your experience or not. I have come to love teaching online. I've been doing this for 13 years, and it absolutely still fulfills my love of teaching, even in the online format. But it took me a while to get there. And I still love teaching in person. I don't know if I could say which one I prefer. I'm just grateful when I get to do either one. But we know that many online faculty struggle with this format, maybe don't feel necessarily quite as prepared to teach online. And again, my argument is that when we start teaching, especially at the college level, a lot of people don't have a great deal of preparation in how to teach at the college level, as opposed to K-12, for example. Many of us teach based on our own experience as a student. We think back, I can still remember when I first started teaching, I just thought about what did some of my favorite teachers do? What did some teachers do that made it hard for me to be successful as a student? And this is how we kind of figure out how to teach a lot. But again, especially for those of us who haven't been online students at all, or maybe not very much, maybe we don't have any good examples to follow to help us figure out how to teach online. And so many faculty feel underprepared, under-equipped to teach online, although that's why you're here today, is to get some new strategies and learn some different things. But again, it's just a challenge for both students and faculty. And, I would argue that this is a picture of Tim Cook as the CEO of Apple. I would argue he makes a point that he doesn't think college degrees are actually necessary, but I wouldn't agree with that. You see these emerging academies from Apple and from Google and Microsoft come to our 6-month program. We'll train you in the coding job, and then you can walk into a really high-paying coding job. You don't need a college degree. Well, I heartily disagree with that, and I suspect that if you're teaching college students, you would disagree with that as well. This is a report that came out in 2017 from the Academy of Arts and Sciences, and it has really shaped my thinking, again, on the value of a college education. And even there was another article, I just posted it on LinkedIn this week, that shows that students who have, or people with a college degree, actually have a better life expectancy than people who don't have a college degree. And that's the kind of motivation that fuels me on when I am facing a mountain of grading, or when I am feeling a little disconnected from my students, is that I fully believe in the value of what we do. So this report makes the argument that if we want a better society tomorrow, that we have to improve the student undergraduate educational experience today. That in fact, this country was founded on the principles that an educated populace is necessary for a well-functioning democracy. And I would argue that, again, that the events of the last turbulent 12, 15 months or so have demonstrated that we do want a society with compassionate people, tolerant of diverse perspectives, and college degrees lead to those kinds of qualities and attributes, that greater tolerance, that greater compassion. So the authors of this report say that national priority number one is to improve the student undergraduate experience. That's the best thing that we can do to work for a better society tomorrow, is teach better classes today. That's what they're arguing. And the way I interpret that is, given that online enrollments continue to grow, again, even aside from the pandemic, online enrollments continue to grow. What we know now is that students are asking for the increased flexibility and the new modalities. They want us to keep some of those things to enable them to attend and to be successful. And so given the fact that online enrollments are increasing, given that national priority one is to improve the student learning experience, I put those two things together and I say we need to be better online teachers in order to help our students learn. What we know, this is some information from the Lumina Foundation, who has a goal of achieving, I think it's 60% of all U.S. adults having a college credential of some kind. And we can see we're at 51.3%. And they would argue that, again, whether it's a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, that when we have that educated populace, we are positioned as a nation to be more effective in our global economy and our global society. But now, when we look and disaggregate the data that was represented in that previous graph, we see quite a gap in broken down by race and ethnicity. That those lines at the bottom of the graph represent Black students, Native American or Indigenous students, Hispanic or Latinx students. And you can see there's a tremendous gap between the achievement of students in those populations and even the national average, let alone, as we see represented here, white students or Asian American students. And I'm not really okay with that gap, because to me, if there's a person in my class, I don't care what their skin color is. I want them to be able to be successful, to achieve that goal, to make that better life. And so, again, this is the kind of information that fuels me and helps me to do the best that I can. We know that as we look to the future, what we don't know is what the jobs are. We don't even know what the jobs of tomorrow are. But what we do know is that automation can handle basic cognitive kinds of tasks. And so artificial intelligence, whatever your feelings are about it, jobs that can be automated are, again, things that require a lower level processing. The kinds of jobs that cannot be automated are things that require a higher cognitive processing. Computers can only do so much. Just like I said before, the technology does not do the teaching. We need people to teach because it's complicated, it's complex, it's messy, it's unstructured. There are times when you need to adapt your plan on the fly, a little bit like we were doing here this morning with the technology. There are times when we're teaching and we notice that our students are really confused. That's easier to do in person, I will grant you. We can get the nonverbal cues, but even, for example, in Zoom or in an online discussion forum, we can pick up cues that the students aren't quite getting it. So we have to change the plan on the fly. And that's my point, is that teaching requires complexity, and the jobs of tomorrow will undoubtedly require this higher ability to solve problems and look for creative solutions, processing at that higher level. And as I mentioned, the article that I just posted, by the way, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there. Again, it's arguing as well that the very process of navigating college and being successful in earning the degree, that alone, not let alone the book learning that is happening in our college classes, that the process of navigating and being successful in earning a college degree is what leads to the positive outcomes that are beyond the earnings potential. There certainly is increased earnings potential when people have that college credential 2-year or 4-year. This is a graph of improvements just on a 2-year degree, how college graduates are doing better than their peers without degrees. But there are additional benefits. It's not just about the money, although that's kind of a big thing. What we know is that people who have that college credential live healthier and more engaged and more rewarding lives. They are more likely to be civically engaged or volunteering in their community. They are more likely to have rewarding work that they enjoy and find fulfilling, to spend more time with family, to actually be physically healthier and less prone to chronic health issues. We know that just having that college and to have more time with family, did I say that too? Because that's really important to me, that having the college degree results in these kinds of outcomes. And also a more educated populace is good for all of us. Again, people with college background and degrees more likely to be engaged in their local government or their community as volunteers contributing. Again, we know that people with a college degree are less likely to need federal resources such as income support. We know that people with a college degree are less likely to be incarcerated. So just in general, there's a lot of good reasons to educate our populace and to help every student in our classes to be successful and earn that degree. But the question really is how. As I mentioned earlier, there's this kind of engaged teaching and learning experience can happen so naturally in person. There's a lot of ways that we communicate support to our students. This faculty member here is leaning in. Isn't it kind of funny without masks and everybody's all close like that? These kind of images kind of are a little bit jolting sometimes after this last year that we've been through. But she's there, she's supporting her students. And again, this can happen so much more effortlessly in person. It's harder to do it online. But again, what we know is, and you all tipped my hand on this one at the beginning, it really is about connecting with our online students and being intentional to do that and to keep finding more ways of doing that. Because, on the one hand, I know that sounds kind of time consuming and tiring, but actually it renews our own energy as well. And so if we begin to feel disconnected or frustrated or tired, when we give more to our students, they give more back to us, and that really does help us in our teaching. This is a friend of mine at Portland State University. He has done a course quality survey and online courses for a number of years now, and even though he said the return rate is abysmal, but they have well over 1,000 responses. In fact, I bet by now it's more like 2,000 responses. And he said that the course quality survey is all about how easy was the course to use, basically, how was the navigation, how was the organization, how did you manage the class. He said the only thing that all of those students ever really write about is whether or not their instructor was present with them, because they just want to know that their instructor is present and engaged. And I feel that it is still the case that many times our students are kind of walking themselves through our classes, and we're not seeing that they are people who need our presence, they need our support, or maybe we know that and we just don't really know how. But that is the biggest difference for students having a successful, engaged online learning experience, is to know that their instructor is there with them. There was research that came out in 2019. The title article is, "I Don't Care What You Know Until I Know That You Care." And these researchers went to community colleges and looked at the faculty role in student success and retention initiatives. And what they learned is that the faculty who had the greatest the greatest sort of retention kinds of numbers coming out of their classes weren't doing anything specifically pedagogically. It wasn't any complex or new innovative technique regarding how they were setting up and teaching their classes, except what the number one finding was that teachers with better retention rates had gotten to know their students. They know their faces, their names, and the students can tell that their teacher cares about them. That is the way that we can help our students. That's the way that we can connect with them, is to communicate through what we do in class, how we interact, that we do care about them as people. Now, this is a panel of students who, I guess I was really thinking hard about this in 2019, which was coincidentally the month that Small Teaching Online came out. I went to this conference in California. It is 1,000 college educators all there to learn how to be better online teachers. And forgive this picture, it is a candid, but these are actual community college students in California. You see a range of life stages and backgrounds represented here. And I admit I was curious what they would say, so I was in the audience and I said, "How do you know when your online teacher cares about you?" And so Joanna is the student there on the right. She pulled the microphone over to her and she said, "You know, when an instructor replies to my email, it makes me feel like I actually matter." And that really kind of blew me away. Think about that for a minute. It makes me feel like I actually matter. Students, I mean, not only students, we all use the word actually when we're a little bit surprised about the outcome. Like, I had to go to that office potluck. I thought it was going to be terrible, but actually it was really fun, right? We use that word. You'll pay attention to it in the coming days. It's kind of funny how we use it. It's when we're kind of surprised by the outcome. And so Joanna said that she felt like she actually mattered, as if most of the time she feels like she does not matter to her online teachers. And it had to do with getting a reply to an email. All the other students on the panel went, "Oh yeah, it's nice when you get an answer." And I thought we were doing better than this. Now, to be fair, I teach online. I'm teaching an online class right now. I didn't have a chance to check in yesterday. I need to check in on my students, and so they know that I'm there with them. It's hard to be as present as some of our students want, because to be fair, they may have developed expectations of us. They may think we're like a chatbot and they send a question and boop, 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 they're going to get an immediate answer back. That's not true either, nor can it be true. We have to protect our time and our boundaries. But I still get the sense, because I actually ask my online students every time I teach, how is your general experience taking online classes? And I know for a fact that it is still the case that many of our online students feel less supported than is ideal. And for me, again, it's about sustainably and within work-life balance boundaries. It's about being there for our students and showing them that we care. And if that means that answering an email is enough to help our students feel like they matter to us, well then by golly, I'm going to do my best to give them timely responses to their questions. And so what we have to ask ourselves is, how do we work at connecting? How do we help everyone connect in our online classes? There's been research to show that, I mean, certainly the Community of Inquiry framework, if by chance you haven't come across that is a really valuable resource. Community of Inquiry is all about supporting each other in these online classes. And it's not even just me, the instructor, and you, the student, but it's about structuring ways for students to support each other so that we know that we're all in this together and that we're supporting each other. Establishing and fostering a trusting environment is also very important in these ways to help everybody connect. So again, I would argue that we must connect. And I was really shaped by a blog post that Harriet Schwartz here wrote in April of 2020. Her book is called Connected Teaching. It's all about connecting with people, and that teaching is very, very relational. And that is how we teach, is when we communicate well, when we have good working relationships with our students, and when they feel that they can trust us and that we're there to support them. But in April 2020, she wrote a blog post about authentic teaching and connections in online spaces. She didn't really, let me take that back. I was about to say she didn't have a lot of experience teaching online. That's not true. But She wrote basically this post about, I know it's harder to connect with students online. And I love this phrase that was in her blog post. I see you, I care, you matter. That's all we have to do, is to let our online students know that we see them. In fact, that's the most equitable and inclusive thing that we can do when we're teaching any kind of class, is to help our students feel seen and heard and valued as a respected member of the community. So just helping our students to know that we care about them, that they matter to us, really is what can fuel our own desire to feel that kind of connection and can help our students as well. I fully believe that this work is worth doing. I believe that this is your superpower. You can make the world a better place when you connect with everybody in your classes, when you create online learning experiences that help them to be successful. We are, in fact, teaching tomorrow's leaders. We want that more tolerant, more compassionate society with creative problem solvers, engaged citizens who are going to tackle the unknown problems of tomorrow. This is the work that we're doing. And I think we have to remind ourselves of those things when, again, I was just admitting a moment ago, oh, I didn't check in on my students. I gotta, that work can take our focus off our why sometimes. But this is important work to do. And it really is the foundation of the American dream. Again, Thomas Jefferson, this is the slide I was looking for. He is credited with saying that an educated citizenry is a vital requisite for a free society. He actually said it in much more wordy ways, and there's no one quote of his that is these exact words. This is kind of a distillation of his philosophy, that if we want to have a well-functioning democracy, we must educate our populace. It is the foundation of the American dream, as the authors of that report, The Future of America, Future of Undergraduate Education, argued that the free society depends on educating people, and that the American dream is built on the idea that every person from every background with education can achieve their goals, can succeed. And so as we look forward from this pandemic, from this very, very difficult time that we have all been in, we are all dealing with loss and anxiety and turbulent politics and social justice issues, and just in general, just a lot that we're all trying to process. I would encourage us to emerge stronger than ever. Look at this beautiful peacock. So the opportunities ahead of us are just really incredible. We have this opportunity to support the people in our online classes and emerge stronger, more joyful, and let's just agree that we can even display our beautiful plumage. We can be there for our students. And so again, I would argue or ask you one more time, what motivates you to be an excellent online teacher? Or rather, who? This work really is worth doing. These people in our classes deserve our full support. They deserve everything that we can do to create engaged learning experiences that will help them remember what they're learning, help them to achieve the college credential that they're seeking, and to make that better life for themselves. So let's recommit again to supporting the people in our classes, to being excellent online teachers for the sake of our society, for the sake of our future, and just remind ourselves of why we do what we do, because it's important. It's good work to do. So with that, I think we have a little bit of time for some questions now. I don't know if anything has come in. Thank you. I see some applause. Thank you so much. Just a few of my thoughts about, the value of what we do, because sometimes it's easy to lose sight of that. So what questions might we have? I don't know if anything came in, or if anybody has any questions or thoughts now.
A question did come in. Do you think high school students that had a poor online experience during the pandemic will stay away from online classes in college?
It's a really good question, and I will just answer from my personal experience. I have 3 daughters. They are 13, 15, and 17. They did a lot of online learning this past year, and one of them said to me just the other day, I will never take an online class. I don't like this. Now, to be fair, again, that's my personal experience. And I also believe that K-12 educators were even less prepared than college faculty to teach effective online classes because it really was not in their wheelhouse prior to this pandemic. So I'm not sure. What I think we do know is that students who seek online classes are doing so for a reason. And that, again, is a big difference. In the pandemic, there was a lot of students engaging in online learning experiences that didn't do that by choice. So I believe that students who choose to take online students know that it offers them flexibility. It allows them to pursue a college degree when they might not otherwise be able to, in terms of if they already have a full-time job or if they would have had to relocate and they can't because of family concerns. I believe that we are going to get a wiser student population coming to us that have had the experiences of online learning. I've actually told all three of my daughters, you guys are going to be awesome college students because they have it all figured out now. They know how to pace themselves. They, once again, even with the support of their teachers, it was still a lot more independent than what happens in a classroom. So I believe that when students come to us and choose to take online classes, they'll be smarter about what to expect and hopefully better prepared to be successful. And I do fully believe that, yes, some students coming out of high school will say, no more, I don't want any more online. So that's fair.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Do you think there will be more of a move to hybrid blended learning in the future?
Yeah, 100%. Teaching and learning experts all over the world are claiming, and I agree, that more online is the future. And I say that phrase kind of specifically and deliberately because it doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to be online, but what we do know is the pandemic forced us into new teaching formats. Again, live synchronous in Zoom, this kind of teaching was really not so much of a thing before the pandemic, but now you say teaching online, and this is the first thing that people think about. They're not thinking about how we're engaging with our students asynchronously, which is mostly what we did before. We know that students want the opportunity to Zoom into class meetings. I myself, I'll be honest, I'm in graduate school myself. I just started a doc program, and I want the option to be able to attend my in-person classes that I've registered for the fall. Looking forward to being an in-person student, if I'm honest. But I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm an employee, and I'm a faculty member, and there may be times when I want to Zoom into class and it's just more convenient for me. So I know for a fact, it's not just me, students are asking us to keep these more flexible formats. And again, many colleges, I'm not sure what you're planning there at Bucks County, but many colleges are planning for kind of a phased transition during this fall semester, more hybrid, more high flex, whatever term you're using there, remote synchronous, and kind of easing back into in-person that way. And I know for a fact that these formats are here to stay and that online teaching is here to stay. And so it would behoove us to figure out how can we support our students in these online environments. And again, that's another phrase I use really deliberately, not just in the learning management system, not just by Zoom, but how do we figure out how to be more effective in these online spaces in general? Because this is the future, and the future is now, as that phrase goes.
Thank you. Okay, next question. So to see them, the students, we need their cameras on. How do you make them keep their cameras on? It's getting a little controversial.
That's a really good question. Yeah, no, I get this question almost every time. In fact, honestly, I don't know why I don't have a slide on it because I'm always asked this question. And let's go ahead and just acknowledge that it does help us to have faces. Now, some of you here don't have your cameras on. That's okay. I understand that. But when we're teaching, it does. It helps us to look at the faces of our students. But it really is an equity issue. Think back to that story, that slide that I had of the student in the Hamptons and the other one going to her food truck. Some students are just plain embarrassed. They don't want us to see their surroundings. And I know the argument could be, well, they can use a virtual background. But there's lots of reasons. I think I saw a fleeting comment in the chat. It wasn't fleeting, my attention to it was, about for religious reasons, students can't show their faces. And these are things that I have come to terms with in my own teaching as well. So I think that the thing here is that we want to encourage students to turn on their cameras. And I think becoming more adept at teaching to little black boxes is a skill that we can develop so that I know it's nice to have cameras on. and I know that it is an equity issue. So there's actually research already coming out about this. You wouldn't be surprised to know there's been a couple of scholarly publications about how do we handle this situation. And the researchers found that one of the reasons students don't turn their cameras on, and again, this was from earlier in the pandemic, but one of the reasons that students reported is it was just sort of a norm. Like nobody had their cameras on, so they also didn't have their camera on. So one of the recommendations that came out of that article was just set the norm for your students that if you can, turn on your camera. That's just what we do. Or I just read a recommendation literally yesterday that said, start your class meeting, not with announcements. If you are teaching in Zoom like this, start it with an engaging activity or something that students need to do together, because they are more likely to turn on their cameras when you do give them something like that. And then they might just leave them on, right? But for me, it's not about requiring students to turn on cameras. It's about encouraging them. And one of the things that I think is very effective is to just be really transparent with your students and say, you know what, this is kind of a new format. And what I have learned during this pandemic is that it helps me if you can keep your cameras on. I'm a better teacher. You get a better experience. So if you can, keep those cameras on. But I think that kind of transparency really can help your students. Again, set the social norm. In this class, we keep our cameras on as much as we can. Just kind of articulate those things very explicitly. And one other strategy that you can use is to be intentional in when cameras are on and when it's okay for them to turn them off. If you have a section of your class meeting where you will be talking through slides like I was doing earlier today, maybe go ahead and tell your students, hey, it's okay if you want to turn off your camera, because again, research is emerging about the fatigue, the eye fatigue, the eye strain, the physical pain that people are experiencing in Zoom, and the kind of the self-consciousness. Even if you hide your self-view, just knowing that people can look at your face like this, it's kind of weird. We never do that in person. We would never all be sitting here staring at each other's faces like this. So recognizing that this is a strange format and giving your students permission or guidance about when, go ahead and turn off your camera. But for this activity, it would really help me if you're able to turn on your camera, please do. So those are just a few strategies to consider.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, can you give some other suggestions beyond emailing students that you have found effective in connecting with students, particularly students who do not respond to email?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Communication and connection is a two-way street, right? we can't just always be blasting out. In fact, I've actually been guilty of spamming my students sometimes with too many announcements and email communications to the point that I recognize they're probably not paying as much attention. So there are a couple of things. Am I still on the call? Did I drop out of Zoom? I feel like I'm still on the call at least.
We can still hear you.
Is that right? Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. All right, well, my internet did better than I was afraid of. Ooh, I'm back. Hello, I think. So a couple of things that we can do. One is, as I just mentioned a minute ago, transparency. I think that's actually the most important thing that we can do to help our students connect. There's research to show that students want to feel that we are their allies. They want to trust us. And the way that they trust us is when we demonstrate competence and beneficence. This is work coming from Stephen Brookfield's book, The Skillful Teacher. Competence and beneficence. Students want to feel like we know what we're doing, and they want to feel that we are acting in their best interest. When they feel those things, they are more likely to trust us, which means they are going to connect with us kind of in less tangible ways. Maybe they're not going to respond to an email, but they are going to be more invested in terms of their time and their energy. They'll be more engaged. They'll be participating more actively when they trust us. So transparency, helping your students or just telling them things that maybe, remember again, the disconnect created by the distance and by the screens. Our students get to know us a lot when we're teaching in person. They see the way we talk and walk and dress and all these things. They just get to know us. They know our mannerisms better when we're in the same room. So being intentional to be more transparent about circumstances and such can help our students connect as well. For example, what I said earlier about it helps me if you're able to turn on your cameras, or just go ahead and be more of yourself. Be more transparent about helping your students see you as a real person on the other side of the screen. Again, we know that online students struggle to see us as actual people. They kind of do think that we're robot teachers sometimes. I mean, I'm making some generalizations here, but it is hard for people to see each other as real people. Again, if we were all in the same room, this would be a very different experience. And we just need to translate that to our teaching. So share your personality in your online classes. If you enjoy a good meme, then send that out in an announcement. Personalize your communications with your students. Include pictures of your pets doing silly things or the hike that you took over the weekend. Anything like that that can be more intentional about helping your students get to know you a little bit within the bounds of your comfort level, your personal professional comfort level. Just share more of who you are with your online students through video, through pictures, through announcements, through communicating with your students in your tone of voice. So in online classes, we do a lot through writing, and it's easy to get kind of detached and impersonal in the written communications. I like to make a really intentional effort to write the same way that I speak and use the same kind of colloquialisms and turns of phrases just to help my students know me as a person. So those are some of the ways that we can connect with our students, encourage them to connect with us. And it's not just about necessarily emails or responding to our feedback, that kind of thing.
Great. Okay, next, I'm going to combine a couple of these into one. So there's a concern about a greater skill gap in students after this year. Related to that is students' lack of organization. How can we meet individual needs that might be greater in online classes?
Yeah, good question. And again, the very fact that you're asking that question, those of you who were thinking about those kinds of things, indicates to me that you do care about your online students. And that, for me, that's more than half the battle, is that we are thinking about these things. So I know in K-12, the phrase that they're using is learning loss after this past year. I don't consider myself to be an expert on that, but even without the pandemic, how do we support students who may be coming to us without the abilities to be successful in these online classes? Because it really, again, it requires better executive functioning skills, better ability to work independently. Well, I do have a lot of suggestions on that note. I think that what we can do is to structure activities and assignments that help students take responsibility for their work and structure for themselves how they're going to manage their time. For example, the class that I am teaching right now, it started on Monday, even though it was a holiday, we still started. I don't know why the school did that. And it's only 4 weeks. The class is over. We have just over 3 weeks left, and it's a full 3-credit graduate class. So what I do is I ask my students, even though they're graduate students, to please submit a work plan. I want you to, it's an assignment in my class and it's worth points. When and where and how are you going to be working on these bigger projects in order to get them done within this time? So that's the kind of thing that I mean when we structure assignments and activities. I know people who have like a time management worksheet that they give their students, and now you could do something like this as an optional activity, or you can make it required. There's nothing to say that you can't have things in your class, even if they're not specifically about your content that you're teaching. This time management worksheet that I have seen before, it basically has students list all the amount of time that they spend every week during, various categories of activities: sleeping, eating, working if they have a job, exercising, watching TV on Netflix or whatever they might be doing, hanging out with friends, how much time do they spend on social media. And it asks students to categorize how many hours per day they're doing those things and then add them up. Do you actually have enough hours in your week to do this online class? And if not, you're going to need to make some adjustments here or cut back on something in order to make time. So again, that's the kind of thing that I believe we can provide for our students to help them recognize that they need to take that responsibility for themselves. And I would, along with an assignment or an activity like that, I would again be extremely transparent about why. Here's why I'm asking you to do this. You have to plan your time carefully and differently than you do when you're taking classes in person. I noticed this again in my own family. My girls happen to be pretty good students, and they were not really accustomed to doing work at home before the pandemic. They would go to school. They were able to finish all their schoolwork and all their homework and whatever there, and in their case, they often did their homework on the bus on the way home. By the time they got home, they didn't need to do school. So for them, it was a big mind shift, like, oh, I need to figure out when in my own day I'm going to get my schoolwork done. Just being transparent with students about, how these strategies are going to help them. I did happen to see in the chat box, I didn't read the full comment, but I did see a note, I think from Jonathan, about online student readiness. And again, whether or not your school has that in place in an orientation, you can just put that into your own class, maybe. I mean, I'm saying these things, maybe classes are coordinated and curriculum is set, and maybe you don't have a lot of wiggle room, but you can still put these things like in announcements, even if you don't want to make it a real assignment. There are lots of online student readiness kind of quizzes out there online. You can Google that. You can ask your students to do one and then submit like a plan. Like, okay, I recognize that I'm a little short on this particular skill set or this area. It's a little bit, I'm a little, weak in that area. So this is my plan. Here's what I plan to do now that I know that about myself. So I definitely, the way I think about it is online teaching is about more than just delivering the content, which is a phrase I have come to like less and less. What am I, a pizza guy? I'm just going to deliver your class to you? No, I'm going to interact with you, facilitate your learning. And part of that interaction and communication is about, like I said, beyond the content. It's about how are you going to be successful in this class and in life? How are you going to be an engaged citizen? So I'll get off my soapbox on that. Anything else for today?
Do we have time for one more question? If that's okay with you. A funny comment along the way, a comment from Jonathan: my cat has become famous among my students. If he's not in the frame during class, students ask about him. I think a lot of us have had similar experiences this year.
Yeah.
So do you think students also feel as disconnected in live or synchronous classes as your data was referring to in asynchronous classes?
It helps. There is some research to show that having the live synchronous opportunity does help students feel more connected. And so the flip side of that coin is, well, then they should keep their camera on, because then we're a little more connected that way too. It does help. And I also think that there are a lot of students, again, they are reporting that it does help them to have a class meeting time, just like as if they were going to class. So that's why I believe that Zoom teaching is here to stay too. I'll be honest, I struggled with it. My expertise in my book is about asynchronous online teaching. And so when all this Zoom stuff happened, I was like, that's not teaching, but it is, and it's the new thing. And so I've been on a learning journey myself during this, last 15 months, and kind of had to take a growth mindset for myself. But yes, the Zoom teaching helps students connect more. And what we also know, the research is also showing that it's still not the same as in person. And for example, they don't feel like they have as much of a relationship, so that if they do have a question, even if they're accustomed to seeing you, they're still actually nervous about asking that question or asking for help. They feel intimidated. They don't know you as well. They don't trust you as well. And so even though it helps to have these real-time video communications, we still need to really be intentional. That's one of my watchwords right now. Be intentional about being a real person and inviting our students to communicate and not feel worried about reaching out with a question or whatever it might be. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much. As a few people have mentioned, your talk was empowering, interesting, informative. I want to just do a quick plug. If you haven't read or seen Small Teaching Online, I highly recommend it. I'm sorry that we're not in person. I would love to get it signed, but what are you going to do? I want to thank you so much, Flower, for joining us and working through the technical issues. You did so with grace. I am dropping for everyone else my email address in chat. If you have any questions throughout the morning of our conference, please feel free to email me. The remainder of our sessions today will take place in Blue Jeans, not in Zoom and YouTube. So you can get links to all of those sessions through our Whova app for the Whova website, which was sent out a few times over the past few days, but I'm happy to provide you that information if you need it. So our next set of sessions begin at 10:25, I believe. 10:25. So thank you again, Flower, for joining us, and I look forward to seeing everyone else in the sessions this morning.
Thank you again for having me. Thanks for putting up with my technical difficulties. Yay, it worked mostly, so thank you. Have a great rest of your day.